So, imagine this. Just off the coast of Singapore, there's this city. Huge. Built for over 1 million people.
Hmm.
A massive, like, $100 billion project. But today, it's practically silent, empty.
Yeah, it's Forest City in Malaysia we're talking about. It really does feel like something out of a deserted sci-fi movie, not a thriving city.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into this. We've got a great article that really gets into the story behind Forest City.
That's right. And our mission really is to figure out how this incredibly ambitious project ended up, well, like this, a ghost town almost.
We want to understand the core reasons, the economics, the politics.
And some of the really surprising twists and ironies along the way. It's quite a story.
Okay, so let's start with the dream. What was the original idea?
Well, it wasn't just, building some houses. The concept was huge. An entirely new city built on man-made islands in Johor, Malaysia.
Right next to Singapore.
Exactly. And the target market was very specific. They were looking mainly at buyers from Singapore, naturally, but also the booming Chinese middle class.
Offering them what, luxury living?
Luxury living, absolutely.
Yeah.
High-end amenities. And they even dangled things like potential pathways to citizenship, a whole package deal.
An international hub, basically. That was the vision.
That was the vision. But the reality now, as the article makes really clear, is starkly different.
How different are we talking?
Well, estimates put the actual residents at fewer than 10,000 people.
10,000 out of a potential million.
Yeah. Occupancy rates in some parts are apparently as low as like 2 or 3%.
Wow.
So you've got these huge skyscrapers, practically empty, streets designed for heavy traffic, totally deserted. It's eerie.
Yeah.
There's this real sense of abandonment.
The article paints this picture, this kind of weird contrast, doesn't it?
It really does. You have this ultra-modern architecture right up against mangrove forests.
And industrial areas.
Industrial zones, yeah, and even beaches where, get this, crocodiles still hang out.
Crocodiles? Seriously?
Seriously, it's this strange mix of like futuristic ambition and raw nature just pushing back.
And speaking of nature, there's a big irony here, isn't there?
Yeah.
About where it was built.
Oh, absolutely. This is maybe one of the biggest ironies. The land itself, the ground Forest City stands on, it was created on top of what used to be a designated mangrove conservation zone.
Right. So they built this symbol of modern progress by basically paving over a protected ecosystem.
Pretty much. It's kind of staggering when you think about it.
And didn't the article mention something about an eco-museum?
Yes. That's the other layer.
Yeah.
They actually included an eco-museum inside Forest City.
It's almost darkly funny. Like, here's a museum to remember the nature we removed to build this.
Exactly. It's surreal.
Yeah.
And of course, the whole process of land reclamation, creating land from the sea, that inevitably caused huge environmental disruption to the local coast.
Okay, so who is behind this massive and clearly complex project?
The main developer, according to the article, is Country Garden Holdings, a huge Chinese real estate company.
Okay.
And to really get why Forest City ended up like it did, you have to look at the timing, the history. Several key phases kind of led to this point.
Right. It wasn't just one thing.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
It starts really back in the 2000s with China's massive property boom.
Right. The economy was soaring, lots of new wealth being created.
Exactly. A rapidly growing middle class with a lot of capital. They needed somewhere to put it. And property was, well, it was hot. Maybe too hot, some analysts said even then. An overheated market.
And Country Garden saw an opportunity there, beyond China itself.
Precisely. Their strategy was clever, in a way. Develop these huge offshore cities, like Forest City, specifically designed to attract those wealthy Chinese buyers.
With those perks we mentioned, the lifestyle, maybe residency.
Yes, all that. Then 2008 happened, the global financial crisis.
Okay. How did that play in?
Well, China responded with this enormous stimulus package to keep their economy going.
Injecting huge amounts of money.
Massive amounts. And while it worked to prevent a severe downturn, an unintended consequence was that it pumped even more money into this system, further inflating that property bubble.
So even more cash looking for a home, including overseas projects like Forest City.
You got it. But that flow of money wasn't going to last forever.
Right.
The article points to 2014 as a really critical turning point.
What happened in 2014?
China brought in much stricter capital controls. Suddenly, individuals were limited to moving only, I think it was $50,000 out of the country per year.
$50,000? That's not much if you're buying luxury international property.
Exactly. It was a massive blow. The very people Forest City was built for, these affluent Chinese investors looking to buy abroad, they basically had their main funding route cut off almost overnight.
Wow. So the primary customer base just vanished.
Not entirely, but their ability to invest was severely hampered. It wasn't a slow decline. It was like a switch was flipped, and then things got more complicated.
How so?
Politics. In 2018, Malaysia had a change in government. Mahathir Mohamad came into power.
In his administration.
They were, let's say, more skeptical about large-scale foreign investment, particularly from China. This created a climate of uncertainty, which further put off any remaining potential foreign buyers.
And we should remember, as the article points out, that local Malaysians generally couldn't afford these places anyway, right?
Right. The price point was way out of reach for most locals, so the project was incredibly dependent on that foreign demand.
Which first got choked off by capital controls and then further dampened by political shifts.
Exactly. A kind of perfect storm of factors hitting its target market.
So the article gives a sense of what it's like now. What did the author find when they stayed there?
Yeah, it sounds really quite unsettling. The author describes staying in this tall apartment building, like 46 stories,
Okay.
and just feeling this overwhelming silence. Looking out at night and seeing only maybe a handful of lights on in the entire building.
Gives you chills just thinking about
It
it.
really paints a picture of just how empty it is. Profoundly underused.
And there was that weird detail about the hotel.
Oh yeah, that was strange. Apparently, the hotel within Forest City was fully booked.
Fully booked. But the streets are empty. How does that work?
Good question. The article speculates, could it be bulk bookings? Maybe corporate groups or schools using it for something?
Right.
Or maybe the numbers are just managed somehow. It adds another layer of mystery.
It doesn't sound like things are being kept up very well either.
No, that's another major issue raised. The author mentioned seeing visible mold, issues with water leaks in the apartments.
Not great in a luxury development.
Not at all. And even basic things like elevators apparently malfunction frequently. Plus, there seems to be this issue with maintenance.
What's the problem there?
It sounds like the management company has a monopoly. Residents can't just hire their own repair person. They have to use the management's contractors.
Who probably charge a premium.
That's the implication. Inflated costs, no choice for the homeowners. It adds insult to injury, really.
It really does sound like that post-apocalyptic video game comparison the article made. A shiny new place, just decaying.
It fits, unfortunately. And the article shares this story about an investor, a friend of the author's, which really brings the problems home.
Oh, yeah. What happened to them?
Well, a whole list of issues. Things that were promised as free amenities suddenly required payment.
Bait and switch, basically.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
Then, the maintenance thing, they weren't allowed to hire their own people for repairs, forced to use the expensive management ones.
Okay.
And when they tried to sell their unit, the management apparently interfered, made it difficult.
So they were trapped.
Pretty much. In the end, they had to sell it back to the developer and took a huge financial loss doing it.
Ouch. And the article suggests this wasn't just a one-off.
No, it implies this was a more common experience, a pattern of disappointment and, frankly, financial pain for many early investors who bought into that initial dream.
So back to the big question. Why is it so empty? Despite seeing signs saying sold out.
Right, those signs. The article's pretty clear they're misleading. The actual occupancy rate is down in that, tiny 2–3% range.
So why aren't people moving in, even if units are technically sold?
Well, one factor seems to be this perception issue. Forest City feels, apparently, very much like a self-contained Chinese colony.
Not really integrated with Malaysia itself?
Exactly. It's kind of isolated, which probably limits its appeal even for Malaysians who could potentially afford it, let alone the majority who can't.
So, summing up the emptiness, unaffordable locally, foreign buyers scared off by politics and capital controls, potentially poor investment returns, and management issues.
That seems to be the toxic mix, yeah. All those factors converging.
The article had a few other sort of intriguing observations towards the end, too, something about security.
Yeah, the author noted the constant presence of security guards everywhere and being told not to take photos, especially in the showrooms and sales areas.
Makes you wonder what they don't want people to see or document.
It raises questions about transparency, doesn't it? And the perspectives of the workers there were interesting, too.
Where are the workers mostly from?
Often from places like Bangladesh, Nepal, the Philippines. And their take was interesting. They found it quiet, peaceful even.
Which makes sense if it's empty.
Right. But also disconnected. Surreal. Like living in an empty movie set almost.
And then there were hints of other things. Money laundering, Duty-free.
Yeah, the article touches on observations that raise those questions. The presence of duty-free liquor stores, talk of corporate tax breaks. It hints that maybe the real beneficiaries or purposes of the project go beyond just selling apartments.
Interesting. So is there any hope? What's the potential future for this
Well,
place?
it's not all bleak, potentially.
Mm.
Its location is still a huge
Huh.
plus being so close to Singapore.
That's a major economic hub right next door.
Absolutely. And the basic infrastructure is there. The buildings, the roads, they exist, even if they're underused and maybe not perfectly maintained right now.
Could the Malaysian government step in?
That seems to be the key thing the article suggests. If the government decided to actively integrate Forest City, maybe rethink its strategy, adjust the pricing to make it accessible locally.
And reduce that reliance on foreign money.
Exactly. It could potentially be revived,
Yeah.
but it would be a massive undertaking, a huge shift in approach.
Yeah. Sounds like a long shot right now.
As it stands, yes. The article concludes, and it's hard to disagree, that Forest City is really a cautionary tale.
About what happens when ambition outruns reality.
Pretty much. The risks of massive speculative developments, especially ones so tangled up in international capital flows and shifting political winds.
So wrapping up this deep dive, Forest City is just this striking symbol, isn't it? A grand vision that crashed into some very hard, very complex realities.
Yeah, a dream of a thriving international city that's become, for now at least, this largely empty monument to miscalculation.
It definitely leaves you thinking.
It does. And maybe the question for you listening is this. In our world that's so connected, what does a story like Forest City tell us? What are the big lessons here about building cities, about global investment, especially when things are planned on such a massive international scale? What really decides if these huge projects succeed or, well, fail like this one seemed to have?